Well, as you know, my name is Cdale, and I just want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon, Taisha Stans, and I'm hoping I am not butchering your name. I've read your name so many times, especially when you pop up on our Patreon page. And as a thank you, this is a podcast for you, and we are dedicating this podcast, this intro to you, saying thank you and for sticking with us. Especially we took some time off. I mean, our last podcast was back in December, and we've had a lot of new things coming our way, a lot of exciting things coming our way, and happy you've stuck along there with us, and a lot of cool stuff coming your way as well. If you guys are listening to me on the podcast, watching me on Facebook, on YouTube, Instagram, wherever you may be, make sure you search patreon.com/fallen hour, and we are going to start releasing a lot of more cool things, especially in the coming months. And we have just launched season 4. We actually just started recording our first episode tonight. Markus just left my place, and we just recorded Papa Legba, and this podcast that you're about to watch is insane, and I hope you guys stick along through the entire podcast, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube, listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you may be. That is at Fallen Hour on the podcast platforms, and at Fallen Hour on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram. Make sure you guys follow along and get involved with us. I want to hear from you guys, especially from our Patreons, and inbox a page. And this one, I want to give this time for you. This is for Taisha Stans. I want you to inbox a page at Patreon or inbox a page on Fallen Hour and tell us what you want to see. What's the podcast you're waiting for? And if you have a ghost story, something creepy you wanna lend to the podcast, make sure you inbox us your story. Inbox us the next subject we should cover after we do our next episode, because we're actually going to be jumping into either Bigfoot or UFOs, so those are totally off limits to you. So any conspiracies out there that you've heard about, anything you want us to investigate, we are on it. So make sure you inbox the page and we'll get to work on it, and it's going to be something cool going forward. We have a lot of cool stuff coming forward as well for our Patreons. A lot of behind the scenes access we are starting to release. We're actually starting to formulate maybe a vlog series of we're vlogging and showing some of the equipment we're using, some of the lightings we're using, how we edit the podcast, how we research for the podcast, how we talk about, because a lot of times Markus will come over and we'll talk about our next podcast and how we're going to do this, how are we going to structure this, what are some questions you want to ask during the podcast, what sort of feel do you want this podcast to have, and all of that is going to be recorded and released for our Patreons first, and then we are going to start releasing those also for our followers. So for our followers out there on Facebook, on the podcasting platform, Spotify, Breaker, Castbox, Apple Podcasts, wherever you may be, a lot of behind the scenes access is also coming your way, and it's going to be interesting. So if you want to see those things and hear those things first, and also hear about things that we are going to be releasing that aren't published yet on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or on our podcast, make sure you search patreon.com/fallen hour. We have a lot of cool stuff coming, especially with this dancing cable we've been talking about for the past year. And we're going to be lining that up, and it's going to be an interesting podcast, an interesting paranormal investigation, and I hope you guys join along for the ride. So that is patreon.com/fallen hour. Taisha Stans, I am happy you have stuck along with us, and I'm happy that you were supporting the podcast. And here's to another season 4, Fallen Hour Radio. Let's get started. And we're live.
Is it live?
Mananalu water. Not even one of them.
I know.
It's just water.
That's pretty good.
But you love the water.
I do. That is really good. Mananalu?
Every podcast going forward, we'll have is Mananalu water.
That is really refreshing.
Aquaman. Can't even taste the Aquaman.
Yeah, we got to cut out that.
I know. I'll probably have to drink over here. I turned those hot. You want those a little lower?
I think it's fine. It's just,
All right, ready?
You know what I mean?
3, 2. My name is Cdale.
Really? You're going to start it that way? I think everybody knows.
My name is Cdale. This is Markus. You're listening to Fallen Hour Radio. Season 4 premiere starts now.
So this is going to be the premiere.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, last one, we screwed up on that one.
You screwed up on that one.
Well, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Cdale. This is Markus. As you know, this is Fallen Hour Radio, and this is our Season 4 premiere. We are talking about probably one of the most profound deities, especially in Haitian culture.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're getting into, especially West Africa and those regions, Papa Legba seems to be either the most feared or one of the most looked to as in, like, it's like a voodoo culture. Well, this is voodoo culture we're getting to, like Papa Legba.
I don't think he's like the most feared. Oh my God, really?
Right?
You're gonna do that now?
I know,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
1 second, let him adjust.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
All right. I think he's feared by some people because he gets confused with other voodoo like gods and stuff.
Right. So how would you want to take this podcast? I mean, we want to basically do
You want to focus on Papa Legba on this, right? Okay. Yeah, let's go that way.
So just a disclaimer to everybody out there listening, we aren't trying to convert anybody to practicing Haitian voodoo or any kind of voodoo. We aren't trying to point any...
What the hell is that?
I have no idea what that was. We aren't trying to point any... We aren't trying to give you a bullet point list of how to practice
voodoo or
Right.
anything like that.
Right.
Or encourage it.
Right.
Because it is an entire belief.
Right.
An entire belief system.
And if you aren't careful, I mean, this is one of the ones, like, if you aren't careful at all, this has ramifications.
Like it can cause, you to be hexed. It can cause you to be cursed. It can even cause death.
Right.
Yeah, in this culture.
And this is basically the central theme going forward is everything we are mentioning going forward, knowing that even talking about certain deities and talking about certain practices have in and of themselves can have ramifications.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when you're getting into, I mean, we get so many comments out there when we talk about certain subjects and people being like, oh, be careful. And it's like, oh, well, first of all,
we get that a lot. And not only that, like those are the kind of things that I really like looking into.
Right.
But at the same time, we get a lot of people, talking to us saying, you be careful when you talk about this. Like, yeah, we know that.
And meanwhile, you're 15 minutes into our podcast, and now you comment.
I know. And not only that, they're like, oh yeah, be careful when you talk about this, or be careful when you talk about that, or don't even talk about that.
Right.
We get that a lot. But at the same time, people stop us, wherever we are. And they want to hear about that. They want to hear more about that kind of stuff. They want to hear about the stuff that, that are supposed to be under wraps, in different cultures, like especially like Native American culture. People stop me all the time and ask me we should do more of those.
Right. Yeah.
They want that stuff.
And I mean, when you're looking to, this one, I especially wanted to do that disclaimer because there's not many subjects that creep me out.
This one was actually pretty creepy.
And it wasn't like a creepy feeling. It was like you're doing something wrong here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, because I get it, because when I was looking into this, I started getting the same feeling.
Right.
Like,
But
I was
then
like, wow, this is like really deep, like going really deep into it. I was feeling the same way.
And it's funny because,
tread lightly.
Papa Legba has always been on my radar.
Yeah.
And we watch movies and there's and TV shows, and Papa Legba always seems to be a central theme of certain genres,
characters,
right?
Yeah, and not only that, like inspiration for certain characters.
And there's also a cartoon that came out who portrays who I think now is Baron, researching this, and it's a Princess and the Frog, I think.
Yeah, did I tell you about that?
Yeah,
yeah.
And then he comes out and you got to make a deal with him and all that stuff, and I was like, that's freaking they're portraying voodoo, like a voodoo god, and it's kind of a cool thing to see. Then again, it's like you're showing this to children. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. But they kind of like put a childlike twist on it.
Right.
They try to make it like child friendly, but when you actually research into this and look into this, that is like almost spot on the way they kind of portray who this is. But they kind of like make his looks look more like Papa Legba.
Right.
But his personality and everything more barren.
Right. He's kind of like upbeat and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And right. So I had drawn this logo that has been seen on it's been seen on the podcast, especially in our Halloween series, and we went into, I think I had it on there too when we went to the Moss Mansion.
Yeah, I think you did.
And at the time we were talking about doing okay, let's all try to make a logo and everyone draws their designs, which no one else drew their designs.
I had them, but we just never actually put them. Like I was like, I want to work on this, I want to work on that, and you were just like, bam, slap this on there, and I was like, seeing that image, I was like, it struck me funny.
Right.
I was like,
and that was that was the thing though. It was like when I drew it, I said it's going to be one of those designs, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just drew this design, and I said this kind of makes people think like, okay, so like are they dealing with something? Are they trying to subliminally message us or something? And it had and when I was creating it, I was like, okay, so it's going to have that effect. Yeah, but we're not actually doing it. There's like no ties to anything.
Almost like Blue Oyster Cult type freaking imagery, where it's like it looks like a devil sign, but it's not a devil sign or anything like that. Like a satanic symbol. It's just the design they came up with for their their band. And then it was kind of like that.
Yeah, and I had everyone, I said, okay, so what's your favorite number? And what's Lethe's favorite number? And what's my favorite number? We put those all inside of the image just to make it that much more...
like symbolic. Like make it look symbolic. Yeah. Like a lot of symbolism.
And then I was like, okay, we put it out, and a couple months went by, like almost about a year went by now. And then we get into Papa Legba, and you send a message to Alethea of a screenshot of it's like the dumb way it's just stupid because like you sent it to her like almost like Cdale's dabbling in something or something, but you send her this image and it's a voodoo symbol.
It is,
and it's spot on to what I drew.
It's literally almost exact.
Right.
The only difference I think is the little arms that come out.
Right. No, but if you look at that image, there's dots that do almost the same thing.
Everything is so spot on.
Right. Except for I was doing the lines and they were doing the dots.
Yeah.
And they had these lines going through, and that was one of the images too, because I wanted to do like an hourglass image. Yep. And we had all those designs too. And we settled on.
And didn't Alethea come up with the hourglass look?
Right. Yeah.
And then you did the rest, and I was just, when I saw that, I was like, I've seen this somewhere. Where did I see this? And I started thinking about it. And then I went back and looked into our old, our podcast during Halloween. And it was exact.
When you were researching voodoo.
And when I was researching voodoo, all this voodoo culture and everything like that, or Haitian, religion. And I came across that image and I just put them side by side and I was like, dude, that is too freaking spot
creepiest thing.
Eerily close.
Right.
And I started asking Alethea, where did he come up with this look? Where did he come up with this? Because I was like, it is just too similar.
Right.
It creeped me out.
It creeped me out.
Not only that, because you have that image on paintings and stuff in your house.
Right. And I sold a book with it.
You sold a book with that image in it, and you had those images on the paintings and everything.
Right.
And I was thinking about that, and there's so much weird activity that goes on in this house.
Right.
In this building.
Yeah.
Insane. To the point where we were planning on setting cameras up upstairs because most of the activity is upstairs.
Right.
And it's starting to actually work its way down here.
Right. And it stopped actually because about a couple months ago, I removed that and I threw it away.
You talking about that one with the
original drawing of that image?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after you threw that away, it stopped?
Yeah, it stopped.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I was like, you had this image all over the house. And ever since then, there was all this activity going on in here.
Right.
I was wondering if that kind of started opening up a doorway.
Possibly.
And
it's strange because that image just totally came out of my imagination.
Yeah.
And trying to draw
something. I was asking Alethea because like I remember you had these weird dreams where there was these weird symbols.
Right. And Alethea had that dream too.
Yeah, that dream. And I was wondering if that's where that came from. I was going to ask her about that.
She had, that's kind of funny you say that too, because she had a dream about owls, and that was kind of the idea going into that drawing was actually trying to portray that we were trying to be it's going to be an image that's going to catch your attention, and it's going to make you think, like, are they trying to portray something even though we're not?
Yeah.
And not to like trick anybody, but it's just one of those cool images. Like you see these in bands and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool to see.
Like a logo.
Right. And that's the thing I was going for when I was drawing it. But when I drew it, I had no idea that it would come out to be possibly a voodoo image.
It was.
Right. Yeah. It's got the heart on top, just like that did. It's got the, I don't know if I had a line through it or not, but it had the weird arms on it and the legs. And it had the horns coming out top. It's freaking weird.
I know. I saw that. And I just, right away I wrote Alethea. It's like, where did he come up with this?
And just for you guys at home, you guys are going to be seeing images. You guys are going to be seeing voodoo symbols and things of that nature. So if that makes you uncomfortable, then this podcast isn't for you. This episode isn't for you. But we have a lot more other podcasts you can go and tune into. But this podcast, we are going to be leaning towards the Haitian Vodou culture. And a lot of people think right that if you were to listen to something like this, if you were to watch something like this, then things can start happening inside your home. Yeah. I mean, especially around the time you're watching it. Yeah. We're not saying that it's going to have long-term effects on you, and that's basically our disclaimer. We aren't trying to make that happen. So viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah.
Okay, so that being said, I will start off with just reading some of the notes that I have about Papa Legba.
Okay.
And here we go. So Papa Legba is the gate.
And not too fast. I mean, the last podcast we did, you blew through your notes that we couldn't understand you.
Okay, so Papa Legba is the gatekeeper between life and death, meaning the communication to the dead, you would have to speak with Legba first, and he would decide if you may or may not speak with the dead. Yeah. So if you had someone pass away and you wanted to reach them, then Papa Legba is the first stop, especially in Haitian culture.
In the Haitian culture, actually, he is the first Loa that you actually come to talk to any of the others.
Right, but he isn't the central deity. He isn't the god of the Haitian culture. The people who practice Haitian Vodou actually believe in one god. Mm-hmm. And then this is basically all these Loas are different families they're classified as Loas, right?
And yeah, they're supposed to be all his children.
Right. Yeah. So I probably have that here. So I'm probably going to reiterate.
Yeah, just letting you know.
So Papa Legba comes from a Haitian Vodou. The people who practice Haitian Vodou believe there is one God, Bon Dieu, which translates to good God. There are subfamilies. Well, I basically did like a little note here. We won't have time to mention all those families because there's plenty of other families that come along with this culture, and they're basically his children. So we're not going to go through every deity and list all those. So Papa Legba is one of the Loas that, and are more notable. One of the most popular. He is associated with the Crossroads, and we'll get to that in a second. Also with how this possibly could have been the roads into all these movies coming about, the Crossroads, and people selling their soul in the Crossroads.
And could possibly be the birth of the blues.
Right, exactly. So that being said, to communicate with any other Loa deities, you would have to speak with Papa Legba first. He holds the keys to both heaven and hell in Haitian Vodou culture. Sorry if I'm tripping over words. I don't read much on podcasts. The reason we wanted to cover Legba isn't just lore and musical history like Robert Johnson meeting Legba of the Crossroads, but I know I wrote this down. So he's been popping up around different things around the world, different videos around the world. He's been being popularized by things like TikTok, YouTube videos, movies, and
And sightings, I guess.
Right, and sightings. So that's kind of the reason we wanted to. And this is funny. It's kind of funny because we're going to talk about a coincidence that happened with this podcast and the timing of this podcast and how that ties into Papa Legba.
Yeah.
So do you want to get into what you have before I get into, do you want to talk about the Caitlyn Reston, or do you want me to talk about her?
You can go ahead and get into that.
Okay, so this is what we're talking about, especially when you're getting into voodoo practices, when you're getting into any practices that has to do with contacting the dead, working with spirits, demonic forces, using a Ouija board or ghost investigating, things like that.
Basically any doorway you can use to talk to spirits or the other side or anything like that.
Right. It has a huge consequence.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start opening up these doors, there has to be consequences there. And the way that demons work especially is they can make you sick. They can make your finances just plummet. They can put other people around you in turmoil as well, and you'll be totally fine. It's almost like having a sickness and everyone else is catching it first. And then you start reaping those consequences. Right. So the story of Caitlyn Reston, this is possibly one of the most notable in the past couple of years of being, she was dabbling in something and it totally just took a toll on her.
It backfired.
Right, it backfired huge. So this is a West Virginia teen, and this is the headline. West Virginia teen dies after summoning the Haitian Vodou god Papa Legba.
Yeah. By
burning a voodoo doll on March 29th, 2020. This was apparent by posting she made on social media. Her friends and followers warned her of dabbling in voodoo, and she replied, "Let me live."
Yeah.
And she's basically out there showing that she's performing voodoo rituals and things like that, and she's getting into it, and she's making this a spectacle on her social media. And
like she was kind of stirring up a controversy, but she liked it. She liked the spotlight of that. She liked people noticing what she was doing. She liked kind of drawing that attention.
Right. And we want to just say, if this at all gets back to Caitlyn Reston's family, we want to approach this in a way that's not going to tarnish her image, in a way that's not going to provoke anybody else to use the same magics she did.
Yeah. Because it cost her life.
Right. Yes. And we especially want to also talk to basically the people who are practitioners in Haitian Vodou or any kind of practice, that we aren't trying to, because I mean, when we get into podcasts, it's a whole different world from when we live outside.
Yeah.
Outside, we believe in God, we're Christians. And when we get into the podcast, it's we take this spin on things of where we dive into certain subjects for that hour, and then we come out and we're not.
I mean, like I believe, I believe in God. I believe, in what I believe in. And I have a lot of friends though, like that, a lot of friends that I made from doing this, doing the podcast, a lot of friends that I made, all around, and they have their own beliefs. It's not like, we try to cut each other down, and try to tell you, you're wrong or this and that. Like, they talk to me, they ask me questions about, what I believe in, and they tell me, what they believe in, and sometimes if they don't understand something, they'll ask me, and I'll, just tell them about what I know, what I believe to be true. And, and it's not like I'm trying to tell them that they're wrong or anything, because I okay, I get it. You believe in this, and I'm not going to try to push something on you that you don't want pushed on you.
And that's basically what the podcast seems to be. I mean, when we have these interactions with people on the street or in our lives, we aren't there to argue with them.
Yeah.
But we go to the podcast and we just give our beliefs.
Yeah.
Not in a way that you're wrong in this or pointing them out and things like that, but actually trying to explain our viewpoints.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we're trying to do here, as well as trying to differentiate us between this culture, and we aren't trying to lead anybody into that. And saying that again, because I think that's a huge thing to say on the podcast. Yeah. So Caitlyn Reston died April 19, 2020 of an apparent anxiety attack and or heart attack. The autopsy had no conclusive evidence pointing to either one. and they didn't release anything about it.
Yeah.
And I think he was like popularized or publicized in that area. So on April 17, 2020, Caitlyn claimed to have seen Papa Legba and was scared. She posted this on Twitter. Her friends didn't take her seriously. 2 days later, Caitlyn passed away.
Yeah.
In her tub, I believe.
They found her face down in her tub.
Yeah. It's insane. I mean, nobody knows how she died. The only explanation that people are pulling out of this, and this is
from what she was doing.
Right. And the practitioners in Voodoo actually reached out to on her page and things of that nature, and people who were actually not on her page, but people who are claiming that this is attributed to Papa Legba or attributed to Baron, they're actually reaching out and saying that this is disrespectful, that this isn't something that happens, or it's disrespectful to say that this is how she died. It's
disrespectful to Papa Legba is what they were getting at.
Right.
Because Papa Legba is supposed to be good.
Right.
You know, he's supposed to be somebody that's good.
Right.
But there is consequences.
Yeah.
You know, like you're supposed to be respectful when you come to him.
Right.
You're supposed to be respectful when you try to, summon him and make a deal with him.
Right.
But if you don't keep your end of the deal, he'll take it back from you.
Right.
He'll take things back from you. And, but the one thing is he's supposed to be, a good person. He's supposed to be like, this positive kind of person.
Right.
But he also has a twin who is the complete opposite.
Right. This is like a theme now going on the podcast, because we just covered, this is our last podcast, by the way, was in Christmas time.
Yeah.
And we did Krampus, and he had a counterpart.
Yeah.
Of St. Nicholas had a counterpart, which was Krampus.
Yeah.
And we're kind of on a theme here now. So,
yeah.
So Papa Legba also has a counterpart. And so here's the timeline about how things transpired. People circulated rumors of a paranormal death from postings on her social media after her death. March 27th, 2020 was the tweet about her girlfriend, who was actually, she had a black girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And March 29th, tweeted a photo of her burning a voodoo doll with human hair attached. She called her doll baby. Practitioners of Haitian Vodou say these claims are disrespectful, and they may be. And the reason I say that she had a black girlfriend is because they believed, or this story was portraying, everything I was reading anyways, that this girl was practicing Haitian Voodoo.
Mm-hmm. And that's where she got it from?
Right. Not saying that it's a racial thing, or that it's...
Not saying she was... into voodoo because she was, a black person.
Right. And we're here to say that it's not, what would you say? We're not trying to say it's a stereotypical type, saying because she's black, then okay, she's practicing voodoo just because her girlfriend was a Wiccan.
Yeah. And
those two meshing. But this is the conspiracy around the whole thing, saying that her girlfriend was practicing Haitian voodoo, and she may have told her about Papa Legba, and then once they broke up, she started trying to hex her.
Yeah.
Right. What do you say?
Like what I believe, is, she probably tried to, summon Papa Legba, but she probably summoned somebody else.
Right.
Could have been Baron, or it could have been, how do you say his name? Metcalfo.
Oh, you mean the one that only practitioners can...
Only the one, or the one that only voodoo priestess can summon.
Right. Kung Fu.
Metcalfo.
Like that. Yeah.
Metcalfo, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And that is Papa Legba's twin.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And he is the one that is the complete opposite.
Right.
And he is the one that actually stands, between, stands at the crossroads, and he lets in evil spirits and lets out evil spirits.
Oh, right.
That's who he is.
And I mean, I've read a little bit about him, and this is one you don't mess with.
No, like only a voodoo priestess, a male voodoo priestess, or a female voodoo priestess can summon
Right.
They're the only ones that are supposed to be able to summon him. But if anybody else summons him, there is extreme consequences.
He's pissed off.
Yeah.
He'll show up,
but he will punish you.
Right.
And I think that could be, if this was real, if this really happened, that makes more sense than Papa Legba.
Right.
Because this person, he is who they summon when they want to curse somebody or want to hex somebody.
So it's like,
because he comes ready to do that.
So it's like there wasn't too much explanation of why practitioners were mad about this.
Yeah.
So if you were to go out there and say, okay, so what if it was this deity or this Lua?
They didn't even. I didn't find anybody bringing him up in those, because they don't even really talk about him, because he's really feared.
Right. So it's like okay, so what if it's this one then? Like take this Lua, is that more suitable to be less what am I trying to say? Man, it's like it's on the tip of my tongue. It's a dumb word. We just said it.
Up now?
It's less offensive. Yeah. Stupid. I can't get my words out. You know what's funny? We started this podcast, and this podcast has some creepy feels to it, especially researching it. And we told you guys that just a second ago, that researching this, it kind of had the feeling like we're doing something wrong. Like, I don't know if we want to go down this way, but we have to.
Yeah.
And we charged my camera. And this is a brand new camera, by the way.
Brand new camera.
And we plugged it in. I didn't buy it with COVID or, but we bought this a while back, and new batteries, and we charged the batteries up to 100%.
I mean, we used them before.
Right. 100%. And as soon as we plugged it in, we just plugged it in for a couple minutes just to test the lighting, and it just goes bloop.
Yeah, it ran it all the way down to like 6%. 6%. It was about to die.
Right. And I looked at Markus like, battery's dead. He was like, didn't you just charge it? I was like, yeah, I just took it out. It was sitting in the charger in the bag. Take it out, plug it in, and it's dead now.
Yeah.
So creepy.
And that usually happens, like, when, paranormal activity happens. It can drain your batteries.
Right.
That is a well-known fact.
Right. And I just want to say that we are on the way.
Paranormal community.
Right. We are on the way to finally stepping into this. I mean, when we make plans, it's a pattern with us. It takes a year.
Yeah, it usually takes about a year.
We wanted to do urban legends. It took us an entire year. We finally did it.
I didn't know about that till you wanted.
Right.
Yeah, you're like, oh, we're gonna do this. And I was like,
so
okay, cool, do it.
We are on the way. I am planning on ordering some stuff very soon, and we're going to meet the dancing table. And that's going to be our first opening paranormal investigation.
Yeah.
And we're working out logistics. And the way we think, it's like we're thinking about, okay, so this mic's got to do this mic's got to do that. And we're trying to be logistic about it. So it's going to take some time to get there, but we are going to get there. We're on our way.
Like, it's mostly like well thought out or well planned.
Right. Just to make sure
we want to do things.
Because this podcast, God knows we are not professional at all. And we have so many mistakes. Every podcast, there's always something, whether it's our color, whether it's the audio quality, or our video cuts out here and there. We want to make sure that we do the investigating right. So, right. So we can't see our footage actually when we're out there. We want to see it in real time. So,
like, I mean, podcasting, like, it's, 100% audio, but we usually have a video to go with it for people that like to watch, watch these kind of things.
And it's proven
more of a visual element.
It's proven to be a good thing, and with our audience they want to see they want to see how our faces look. Okay, so he's usually depicted in a straw hat, smoking tobacco, or with sparkling water. Papa Legba.
Okay.
And usually has a doll with him. In Haitian Vodou, Papa Legba is depicted as an older man with a cane. Papa Legba isn't just a gatekeeper; he is also a protector of children and protector of prophets. Also, a lua of fertility, aids in long journeys or migration. Also aids in clearing the pathway to guidance. So if you're having basically at the crossroads in your life and you're having some guidance issues, he clears the way so that you can continue making your strides.
Yeah. Not only that, he opens up doorways for you.
Right.
Like if you want, this, he'll open up these doorways. Not only that, he will close them.
Right.
Like if he sees something in that pathway that is going to basically hinder you or anything like that, or be a problem for you, he will close it.
Right.
He'll close that doorway. So like if you're wondering why this stopped or why this doorway closed on you, it's because he closed it for a reason.
Right.
You know.
And this is the reason I want to say we're not trying to lead anybody into Haitian Voodoo, because the way we're talking about Papa Legba right now is
Positively?
positive and light. And when you get into these voodoo cultures, not everything's great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not going to say it again, but I'm just going to stop there. So now this is what I'm going to say is...
But it's not like you just come to him and he gives you these things.
Right.
No, you got to make a deal.
Right. And you must know about every other spiritual aspect to contacting someone like Papa Legba.
Yeah.
You have to learn about the ramifications and things of that nature, and also other luau's that can come with him of all these, because he opens the door to every other one of those deities. And once you open that doorway, you got to be thankful, and you have to say thank you when you're done. Otherwise, he keeps that gate open.
Yeah, he'll leave it open.
Right.
And anything can come through in your life.
And he knows this.
Yeah.
But he also knows basically the way you play the game.
Yeah.
You want to talk to me?
And he's really literal. You know, if he will mess with you.
Right.
He's like kind of a trickster, you know, like if you ask for something and you don't word it a certain way, you'll be like, oh, if that's what you want, then, you know, I'm going to give it to you. You know?
Right. You know what's dumb? The way we do this podcast is a lot of times me and Markus don't share our notes at all ever. So once it's like, have you watched Fullest, Penn and Teller?
Yeah.
It's so when a magician comes on and then Penn Jillette is talking to them in code and giving them keywords that only they know. And then like, okay, I fooled you, because they don't want to reveal their secrets.
Yeah.
It's like when you talk, you're giving me keywords. Like, he's kind of a trickster. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know about that too. So this is kind of a funny time for the podcast. This is our season premiere. We had no plans. We had no intentions of making this on this date.
Yeah.
We had no intentions of starting our podcast around the time of these dates I'm about to mention.
Yeah.
And so what I'm about to read is basically the feast days and or the honor dates of Papa Legba. And it's kind of eerie because we just jumped into these dates. Like we're in the neighborhood.
And there's something else about these dates.
Right. Okay. You can say that. So his honor date is November 1st. But also other dates that fall in March 18th through the 20th are his feast days, and there's also one in June. And right now we are in basically the time of Papa Legba.
Yeah.
And we're not in November, we're in March, but we're basically in the neighborhood of his feast days, which is creepy because we just decided to do this out of nowhere. Had no idea about anything about Papa Legba. And nothing like this. And then
actually, like right around the time of his feast days was when you wrote me and told me you wanted to do this.
And yuck. Disgusting.
Did you realize that?
No, I did not. Wow.
Because when I found that, I was like, wow, okay, that's just really kind of, you know,
right,
coincidental.
Right. Did you think that I knew it was his feast day, so I wanted to do it?
I was like, I know you didn't know that yet, because you're like,
freaking weird.
We got to get into this, you know, this and that. And you told me, I know a little bit about it, but you want to dig deeper into it. And
I don't know why I just sprung up out of bed that day and was like, Papa Legba. That's our premiere. But it just happened that way, and now it's a freaking coincidental, but it's like too coincidental because this podcast has come out this week, and not only is it his feast days, but tomorrow, the 28th, because we're recording this on the 27th, right? Mm-hmm. March 27th. The 28th is when Caitlyn Reston...
No, it was the 28th.
Oh, we're on her date.
Yeah, we're on her date.
The 29th is the anniversary of Caitlyn Reston when she first started posting about Papa Legba.
Yeah, that was today.
Disgusting. That's so crazy. It's like we already have the camera dying. We already have the freaking logo that I drew out, and you just popped that up out of nowhere.
While I was looking into this.
Right. And now we're on the Papa Legba timetable right now, basically.
It's all now.
Right. And we're talking about him. So it's creepy. So he is also associated with saints like Peter, Anthony, and Lazarus. Lazarus. In places like Benin, he is young and a trickster. In Haitian Vodou, Baron is a trickster, and it's kind of like these different cultures are attributing different gods to different personalities.
Like Nigerian or West African, he's more so has the traits of Baron in a way,
Right?
Kind of the way where he's young, that kind of thing. He's younger. He's like a little more of a trickster and this and that. But the trickster side of it is in all the cultures,
Right.
But he is kind of portrayed a little differently in each one. But Haitian is where he's actually an older person. He's kind of wiser. He's still a trickster, but he's just, a little portrayed a little differently.
Right. And we already mentioned his twin, who is also the gatekeeper of evil spells and collects debts and/or makes sure spells are accounted for, meaning he'll show up.
Yeah. He will actually show up. He will show up, but he's only supposed to be summoned by a voodoo priestess.
Right. So let me just take a little detour here. And what do you have in your notes? Because I saw your notes. What do you have about Papa Legba?
Papa Legba?
Right.
Papa Legba is basically, you already pretty much touched on everything that I had for Papa Legba. He's the king of the Crossroads,
Right.
It's kind of very symbolic, that's where you meet him.
Right.
Because each way is a doorway, to him. He can open up a doorway for you in, any way of your life, kind of help you out. He's there to, there to help, people, when they come to him, you got to bring an offering, bring him something for showing up, and you got to be very respectful. You got to, thank him, when after, talking to him and everything. Otherwise he'll leave the doorway open for you on purpose,
What a perfect transition into Robert Johnson.
Okay.
And this is the grandfather of rock and roll. He is the one that paved the way to all the rock bands today, all the blues art. Well, there's actually
kind of like set the template.
Right. That's basically what it is. He had a template, and he's talking about dark imagery. He's portraying voodoo in his songs. And now we have all these bands coming out, and they're portraying demonic symbols and their stage, in their music videos, and it all comes from this genre and/or this birthplace of Robert Johnson. Mm-hmm. And everybody, especially when you're getting into the rock genre, metal genre, blues genre, you know who Robert Johnson is.
Yeah,
because he basically birthed the way to play guitar that way.
Have you ever heard of Tommy Johnson?
I think you told me about him a couple days ago. Oh, Tommy Johnson was his the one before him.
Yep, he was actually the one that started it all.
Right.
People always think it's Robert Johnson, but it wasn't.
Right.
It was actually Tommy Johnson.
Yeah.
Tommy Johnson is the one that actually he met who he said was the devil at the Crossroads.
Right.
He said he went there and, sold his soul for the blues.
Right.
And it birthed the blues.
Right, and Robert Johnson has a totally different story. Mm-hmm. Is he didn't do it at the Crossroads, but he does reference the Crossroads.
Yeah.
And this is the gross thing. I'm going to mention this now before I forget it. So go
ahead and talk about him, and I'll tell you about Tommy Johnson.
Okay, so Robert Johnson was also said to have met Papa Legba.
Yeah.
And the thing about Papa Legba is he honors dogs. Mm-hmm. Right. This is his creature. He basically identifies with, or he loves the dogs. You don't want to say it that way because it's like almost like humanizing him. Like, oh God, he loves dogs and whatever. But I just stopped and restarted that. So
okay.
We're good for another half hour. So he loves dogs, and Robert Johnson is said to have met Papa Legba, and there is a legend, and this seems to be one of the true legends because it was told by one of someone who actually knew Robert Johnson. And so there was a big old event happening, and they wanted Robert Johnson to play. And this is towards the end of his life. And the legend goes that they go to Robert Johnson's house. They give him a flyer, and they say, "Can you be here on this date?" And can you play? And he was excited about it. And then he drops to his knees and he dies howling like a dog.
Yeah.
And that just, when I heard that, and then attributed Papa Legba into dogs, Robert Johnson writing music like Hellhound on My Trail, it gives it a whole different light.
It's disgusting.
It's disgusting. It's like he died that way.
He was acting like a dog.
Right.
Literally kind of like barking and howling like a dog before he died.
Right. He died doing that.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's like, I don't know how you would die that way. You know what I mean? It's like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Unless your time was up in your deal with Papa Legba or someone who is along the lines of who he is.
It sounds more like...
Because he does make deals.
Yeah, he does. But they all do.
Right.
They all do. They all make deals. They all love making deals. Especially...
I got a vapor here.
Especially Baron.
Right.
He loves making deals. And he is the one that actually loves to basically... he's kind of like more of a trickster. He's more vulgar. He likes to party. He loves sex, that kind of stuff.
Oh, funny.
That's more his lifestyle.
Baron.
Yeah, Baron.
Right.
Baron 70, I believe, is how you say his name. But there's like other, different sides to him, and they each have a different name, but they all start with Baron. Like Baron Criminal, I think, is like more of a criminal associated with criminal side.
Right.
There's like all these different sides to him, and they, it said that it could be the same person, different personalities, but people that are actually in voodoo and believe in the voodoo culture have claimed to see all these different beings that are Baron. So they're all separate. So
he's one deity, but he has all these different ways of portraying himself. And
but it said that they've seen these different beings
together.
So
I'm not sure of how they actually, because I researched this very briefly, and I know that this subject is massive.
Yeah,
There is so many different details that you have to learn about it, and especially if you're going to dabble in it. But I wonder if any of these gods are omnipresent in their belief system, because down the lines, they do correspond with Christianity when they're getting into being associated with Saint, like Lazarus and people like him, Peter. And there's all these ties with Christianity always, because this is like one of the oldest religions, and then it starts tying into other cultures and other religions, and now it's tying into voodoo. We're not saying that that's actually what it is, but they've adopted certain things.
Yeah.
And tying Papa Legba to saints like him do these gods have also powers like them to where they are omnipresent, where they can be everywhere at once? Or
yeah, I know. I was kind of thinking of that too.
Because like if Papa Legba pops up, is he here and also somewhere else?
Yeah.
I don't know why I want to say that, but it's like that was one of the thoughts going into researching Papa Legba.
I thought the same thing too. Like that came to mind too.
Right.
Like because he is summoned, you have to come to Papa Legba before you do any voodoo rituals.
Right.
Before any voodoo rituals are done, you must come to him first.
Right. Because like we believe in Christianity.
So if you're trying to summon him for some ritual, could he also be being summoned somewhere else at the same time?
Right. And that's one of the things to learn, because I mean, especially if we're starting to research deities like him, we want to know that thing.
Yeah.
Because we can tie other things to people or beings like him. In Christianity, you have a God who is omnipresent, who is everywhere at once.
Yeah.
And then you have Satan, who isn't omnipresent. He can only be in one place at one time.
Yeah.
So what sort of powers do these deities have? Are they more godlike, or are they portrayed as demon-like to where they can only be in one place at one time? And it's kind of something to learn, and I want to look into that. But if we ever come back to Papa Legba, I don't know how this podcast will go over with our audience. But so, Robert Johnson, grandfather of rock and roll. There is a story told by other famed bluesmen, Son House. Son House said in a short story that Robert Johnson would follow him and Willie Brown around, making noise on his guitar and driving people crazy, which means he would play at this shack in this, I don't know if it was a bar or something, but Willie Brown would be there with Son House. they'd be playing, and Robert Johnson would be the kid going up there and bugging them and saying, "Can I come up on stage and play?" And then they let him play once, and they took him right off because he sucked at guitar.
Yeah, I said he like got booed so hard and literally asked to leave.
Right. So around this time, they said he was around often. He was there like every day when they played. And Robert Johnson disappears, and he returns. He just starts shredding on guitar.
Yeah.
He can play anything, any song you want. If there's a new song that comes out, you want him to play it, he hasn't heard it, he'll play it for you. That's the kind of powers they said he had. And later details came out of where he went. And this wasn't this. I've actually researched Robert Johnson probably in my teens. Mm-hmm. And I haven't heard this part of it. But this is actually new details about Robert Johnson, which is kind of cool. So he went to Martinsville and met his mentor, Ike Zimmerman, which is highly notable, who also has lore of his own. And they said he learned guitar by playing in the cemeteries at midnight. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about, especially Papa Legba, they're saying that he comes at midnight. And there's also legends of saying that there's certain luas that come at midnight or at basically twilight.
But what's funny is you mentioned that he was in the graveyards and stuff playing. That's where I believe Baron.
Right, he's the god of. Actually, Papa Legba also is the god of the dead and the god of the living too. So, but But
he's the one that's kind of like the king of that place.
Right. Interesting. So, he's basically the one that molded Robert Johnson. Mm-hmm. People want to say that he went to the Crossroads and that's where he sold his soul, but this is actually how it actually happened. And this guy he had lore of himself, which means he dabbled in something. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if it was voodoo. I'm not sure if it was any of those practices, but he dabbled in something that made him a notable guitar player. And then he taught Robert Johnson and said to have taught him about these cultures and got him into these practices. And then it wasn't even a couple months. He came back and he was freaking shredding on guitar. And in Robert Johnson's songs, there are hints to hoodoo. In the song Hellhound on My Trail, he sings sprinkled hot foot powder around my door, which is a hoodoo tradition to ward off unwanted visitors. He was also known to travel all the time. It was speculated he traveled so much because he was fleeing the devil.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes sense. I mean, when you see him, especially in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, he's running.
That's actually Tommy Johnson.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is.
Funny. I didn't know that.
They did their research.
They
probably.
didn't.
When I saw it, I was like, okay, now they had that story pretty freaking spot on.
Right, but they didn't actually say who it was.
Tommy Johnson.
Yeah, and they didn't call him by Robert Johnson or Tommy Johnson, right?
You got to watch it.
Watch it. That's funny. So, Markus was waiting for that correction.
Oh, yeah.
And that rebuke. So this is kind of, I want to get into this lens as well, because this points to something that is dark in nature, and it's a stain on, I don't want to sound typical of everyone reporting on slavery.
Yeah.
Everyone reporting on things that happened with slavery. But there is a lens also cast in Robert Johnson's music, and this can be portrayed as being a voodoo, or it could be portrayed as being slavery, the things he's mentioning. So although these lyrics can point to dark magic and things like it, the lyrics can also be linked to slavery. Most of the Delta Blues players were only 1 or 2 generations from slavery, which means that they was like fresh in their imagination and mind, and they were freshly wounded by slavery. Yeah. Hellhound on My Trail could point to slavery in one sense, but that song can also point to voodoo. And if you put in those different lenses, if you look at that and say, okay, let's look at this in a slavery sense, and okay, let's look at this in a voodoo sense, it points to both. It can point to both, and nobody knows because he's not alive anymore. He can't tell you. In Crossroads, Blues, he talks about, there's a song in Crossroads Blues. He talks about the sun going down. And this could have a reference to both hoodoo and sundown towns. And sundown towns, I'll get to in a second. In dark magic, this speaks of the dead of night and evil that follows with it. Sundown towns were white communities. When the sun goes down, they wanted all, if you were black, if you were of color, they wanted you out of the town.
Yeah, they wanted you out of the town before sundown.
Right. Otherwise, you were threatened with death. You were threatened with violence, everything of that nature. Mm-hmm. And anyone who isn't white had to be out by sundown or face violence or death. It wasn't just towns. It was counties as well. And the entire state of Oregon, this is crazy to learn because I had no idea. The entire state of Oregon wouldn't let anyone of color settle up until the 60s, which means that you talk about sundown towns, but a state where they're not going to let, if you're black, if you're of color, I mean, they discriminated against everyone of color. Native American, doesn't matter what you are. If you had color on you, you're not allowed in the state. Yeah. You can't settle here. You can't stay here. You can't stay here for the night. Nothing like that. You got to be gone by sundown. Yeah. And just imagine being caught there in the state of Oregon, and there's hundreds of miles out of that state. So, like, what are you going to do? So you would face things like violence and things of that nature, and or be thrown in jail. So, what do you have on? I wrote down bear now. I'm kind of at the end of my notes here.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about Tommy Johnson.
Oh wait, so let's mention this, and then I'll read this just because to recap on what you said about Baron. Okay. He is the Baron of tombs, corpses, zombies, and decomposition. He is also called on for healing those close to death. He comes in conflict with Legba, who is the gatekeeper between life and death, because they had this. They have basically confrontations with each other when they're dealing with the same subject, and Legba has certain powers, and so does he. They both basically have the same powers.
He actually kind of tries to keep people from digging up bodies, stuff like that.
Oh,
or trying to create zombies, because in the Haitian culture, zombies, that's a real thing,
right? And it's outlawed.
Yeah, it's outlawed because there's certain beings or certain deities that would. You'd be their slave, basically. It depends on how you lived your life. People would try to, create these zombies. They're like slaves.
Oh,
they're like mindless, emotionless. Yeah. They would just do your will.
And he has prolonged lives, and this is actually, there's accounts of this, of them calling on Baron. He would prolong people's lives, and often possesses practitioners, which means he would embody them and speak through them, giving magic powers like being able to raise the dead. Yeah,
it was like his say if you die or not.
Right.
He was there. If there was anything like something against you, he was like, it was his say so if you die from it or not.
Oh, interesting.
So and he is like, the king of the graveyard.
It's something to mention because I've watched videos on Haiti, especially what they call Haiti Zombies. And I read books on this, and it's a real thing. They bring them back to life. Mm-hmm. And I watched a video on this one kid, and this dad, this is actually the last time they allowed it, is this dad brought his son back to life, and this is the reason they outlawed it. Brought his son back to life. There's a video on this. His son's dead, and they're document this. There's like a documentary on it, and he brings him back from dead, and he's totally just brain dead.
Yeah,
he's able to function. Out. Yeah, he's able to function. He's able to move. He isn't able to talk. He's able to like make noise into things. He's not able to eat, but he's just this lifeless person. Yeah, and he has to live with him now. And I don't know what happened with that story, but I just know that his dad brought him back to life.
Have you ever watched Lost Tapes?
It sounds familiar to me.
It's this show that I used to really like. It used to be on Netflix, but they took it off, But there was actually, it's supposed to be real accounts, real documented accounts
Right.
of things that happen. They have stuff on there like vampires, werewolves, thunderbirds, stuff in any culture, just all these strange things. And there was one on zombies. And this is basically kind of what it was. Like, it was like a Haitian Vodou, somebody that practiced in Voodoo who would bring these people back, and she'd have them serve her, basically.
Oh, wow.
She'd keep them in this house. And this whole thing happened in, I think, during Mardi Gras, when there was actually one got out, and she was trying to make him come back in. She was yelling at him, telling him to come back, and he attacked somebody. Woo. And then that caused her to be investigated, and they basically raided her house. And they found all these things everywhere in her house that was like shrines and stuff. Like I think her husband was, there was a shrine of her husband there.
Oh,
and
wow.
that was, I think it was her husband that actually attacked this person.
Oh my gosh.
Brought him back to life. But it like this show, it's supposed to be like all like, actual documented things.
Right.
In it's all reenactments, but it's supposed to be all, true stories. But if you ever get the chance, check that out. It's actually on Discovery Plus now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I'm going to.
So.
I might have watched it. I've watched this one of the Yeti. It's like the opening video, and a freaking Yeti runs by. It's actual real video.
But there's some crazy stories on there. But that was actually one of them.
So, I mean, Alethea, she was like, "What if I became a zombie?" It's like, I'm gonna chain you up, put you in the front yard, to ward off everyone else. And
Shaun of the Dead style, keep you in the shack.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so not Robert Johnson.
Oh, right.
Tommy
yes.
Johnson.
Tommy
right?
Johnson. Yep.
Okay, so Tommy Johnson was said to be the one who made a deal at the Crossroads.
Okay.
They said when he came out, he was playing the guitar like nobody's ever seen before.
Right.
He would even do things that, artists nowadays do, things that Jimi Hendrix would do.
Wow.
He would play the guitar behind his head. He would play it, behind his back, through his legs. He'd just be, crazy with it.
Yeah, this is
and
way
he would just,
before
slay the guitar, man.
Way before rock and roll.
Yeah, way before. Right. This was like back, he basically supposedly birthed the blues. He sold his soul for the blues.
Right.
He said that, how the story actually came out was from his brother. His brother would actually play with him, every now and then, not all the time, but he did some shows and stuff with him. And he said that, one night, he asked him, how did you come up with this? Where did this come from? And he told him that, he sold his soul. And he said, well, how did you do that? He said, somebody told him to basically go to the Crossroads at midnight.
Wow.
And he said, I went there 10 minutes early, so I'd be there on time. So he went there, and he said he sat there waiting, playing a guitar, just playing his guitar, kind of strumming around. And around midnight, he heard footsteps, and he looked up, and he said, I just saw, a really big, the way he described it was a really big black man came up, and he said he walked up to him and took his guitar from him. And he said he started tuning it, and he started playing something on it. And what he played was the blues. And he handed his guitar back to him. When he handed it back to him, it was like he was giving him the blues. Once he started playing that guitar, that's what came out.
Oh, wow.
So it's like he already knew how to play it.
Right.
So, and then what he gave for it was his soul. And, he only had so long to live. And he just started, going out playing and everything. And he became well known because of this. And, he did. He died young, but also he was kind of like the perfect candidate for this kind of thing. Like the kind of person that would, probably sell his soul for something.
Right.
He kind of lived that lifestyle. Like, he was an alcoholic, really bad alcoholic. He lived a certain kind of lifestyle.
Right.
And
how old was he when he died?
He was pretty young. I believe he was in his 20s.
Yeah, I think Robert Johnson was 27.
He was part of the 27 Club. Yeah.
Interesting.
People that died.
That's a trend.
It is.
They always die like 57, 27.
Yeah, but 27, a lot of those people, if you look into them, all the people that died when they were 27 they were 27 were, there were stories about them who actually sold their souls,
Yeah.
Things like that. Like Jimi Hendrix was said to, there's a whole story, I heard on that. I even actually met somebody that knew the person that he was going to see, trying to basically save himself.
Wow.
And he died the night before.
Oh, interesting.
But it was actually it's a crazy story. But anyway, back to Tommy Johnson. He, his brother, after he told him about this and everything, and he saw the lifestyle and everything like that, and his brother ended up dying from this. He took that, really hard. He kind of it scared him so badly that he became a preacher. He became a pastor. Wow. He gave his life to God. He wanted to get as far away from that as he could. And he tried to warn people, about, this was what happens when you sell your soul to the devil, right. This is what happens. He took everything that he told him as fact and he preached on it. Mm-hmm. So this is, when you take that into consideration, that is kind of basically solidifying this story as true.
Right.
It scared his own brother so badly that he became a pastor to try to live for God because he saw what happens when you sell your soul to the devil.
Interesting.
But the way he described, the person that he met at the Crossroads and everything, and I believe he said he had a hound with him. And when he describes that, it kind of leans toward this, one of these deities, one of these voodoo gods. So it's kind of there's a lot of similarities in there, meeting him at the Crossroads. It was, somebody of an African descent, and it was somebody that had a hound with him and somebody that wanted to make a deal, so it's kind of maybe it wasn't Papa Legba, maybe it was another, deity.
Right.
But still he sold his soul.
Interesting.
For this.
Wow.
So it's an interesting story.
Yeah.
And you've listened to his music. It's kind of it's creepy. After you look into it and then you listen to the music, it's pretty creepy.
Right. Wow, you had all that locked and loaded, no notes.
Well, I've been really researching this kind of stuff, and I started going into blues and the birth of the blues and all that, and all these stories behind it and everything, and it's
I'm happy
a deep
that
subject.
I'm happy that I was able to clear up that he wasn't Tommy Johnson. Mm-hmm. That their stories were they're different.
Yeah.
And everyone points that Robert Johnson sold his soul at the Crossroads only because they're both named Johnson.
Yeah.
And they're both blues
that
players.
That was a very well common name. Even Blind Willie Johnson was said to have done the same thing.
And you think that that's all pointing to Tommy Johnson?
Yeah. It started with him and they heard, how he did it. And maybe that's what they did,
Right.
And took that on and went and sold their soul for this too. That's kind of the story behind this whole thing.
Interesting. Anyways, got some Mananalu water. Jason Momoa. Can't taste the Aquaman.
Oh man, this is actually pretty good. I've never tried this until you gave this to me.
Yeah. So we're gonna start recycling and stuff and just using these. It's a good cause. Yeah. So
yeah,
that being said, is that everything you have on Papa Legba?
On Papa Legba himself, yeah, pretty much. I know there's a lot of people get him confused with all these other, these other gods, or these other children, of who this god is, and their culture. And, some people actually get really upset about that, because you're supposed to come to these, talk about these things or come to them and give them respect, it's supposed to be respectful toward them, and especially him, so it's kind of you really got to do your research, and especially people that are trying to get into it, people actually try to get into it and they don't know about it. You see what could happen, you could actually die from it, you could summon the wrong person. It's almost using a Ouija board or using a spirit box. You don't know who you're going to talk to.
Right.
You don't know who you're going to summon if you don't know what you're doing.
Right. And it's never a person.
It's kind of dangerous. Yeah.
It's never a person you talk to.
Yeah.
It's always, we won't get into that and be a whole podcast of itself. But this podcast was, it's strange to get into this whole voodoo thing because we have never touched on voodoo.
Yeah.
We have never touched on Papa Legba. We've never touched on any luau's, and it's kind of interesting of the time frame that we've picked to premiere our episode and premiere our season and start on Papa Legba and then being in his feast days of all things, of actually writing you and saying, I want to do Papa Legba, and not knowing that.
Basically, you wrote me on his feast days.
Right. It's strange. And yeah, we're just getting out of the feast days, and we're getting into now the timeline of when Caitlyn Reston starts having her debacle, if you will, with Papa Legba.
Yeah.
And her...
I don't think it was him, though. Like, the way that it was described.
Well, yeah,
I
it's
think
actually...
it was she actually summoned, like, either Baron. Like, Baron, he's the, he will make a deal. He loves making deals.
Right.
And, he likes, that kind of...
Well, the reason I say Papa Legba is because she herself thought that she saw Papa Legba. Just because that this deity she said she saw, or this luau that she thought she saw, she thought it was Papa Legba, but maybe she didn't know enough.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Maybe she knew how he looked, and then his twin showed up,
and his twin is the evil one,
right? Or another luau show up who looks like Papa Legba, and just assumed.
She probably looked into it. Like I looked into this, and people were confusing Papa Legba with a lot of people,
right?
And I think Eligara too, like even the colors, like they're saying, oh, Papa Legba's colors are black and red. Right. It's not. His colors are yellow.
Right.
Eligara is the one that's black and red.
Interesting.
So people confuse so much things about this.
The reason there's so much confusion is because there's so many different voodoo cultures, and there's so many different. There's Haitian, there's like Benin, there's all these different places, and West Africa, and they all have their differentiating ways of portraying.
Yeah, it's like this. There's some differences, but there's a lot of similarities.
Right.
And I think she might have, summoned the wrong person. Just like I said, you summon that Met Calfo, he will kill you.
Right.
If you're not a voodoo priestess and you summon him, he doesn't come to play.
Yeah.
He will punish you. He will kill you.
You're basically wasting
He will curse your family. He will do things like that.
Right. You're wasting his time.
Yeah, you're wasting his time.
And that is basically the whole thing of anybody practicing voodoo is they say, if you're going to get into this, you have to learn everything about it.
Yeah.
And you can
make some dire mistakes.
Right. You can harm your family. You can harm yourself.
You can curse your entire family.
Right. And the way that curses work is that these can last generations and generations. They can stick to your family name and or blood. And people have to learn that. I mean, you watch the podcast, you're like, oh God, these two crazies talking about Haitian Vodou and Christianity and all these things and magic, and they don't know what they're talking about. They're just crazies. But we've seen some things, you know what I mean? And it's nothing to play with at all.
People ask me questions a lot and, or why do you believe this or why do you believe that?
Right.
Because I've seen things that most people would think are impossible.
We've seen things that would convert you to believing into a god or a demon.
Even when I was younger, I've literally seen somebody brought back to life.
Right. If you don't pray and you've seen some of the things we've seen, you'd probably be praying.
Yeah.
You'd be praying to something.
Yeah.
But
it's
and it's not to gloat. It's it's just saying that we know these things are real, and the reason we started doing the podcast this way is because we were starting to try to learn about other cultures as well and the way they do things. Different lore stories, conspiracies, and where
they come from.
Right. And they can all basically, hopefully, answer the same question.
Yeah.
Of what is a certain lore figure? What is that? Can some other culture answer that question?
Yeah.
What is Papa Legba? Can another culture answer that question?
Yeah, that's why I wanted to get into when we got into Dogman. That's why I wanted you to get into that and look into it, because when I told you, you're kind of like, wow, what?
I know.
What is this? Thought it was some just other cryptid until you looked into it, and it's deep in history. Not only that, it's deep in all these different cultures.
Right.
It's really deep.
We're going to be releasing a podcast, and this is basically our premiere, but it's not. I mean, there's so many flaws in this podcast. It is a funny podcast.
It is hilarious. It's better to listen to it.
Right. And I tried taking this and editing this and not happening.
I
It's
mean,
like
I did the audio and I did not hear what you were talking about until, it
Right.
came to the footage, the video.
Right.
And
So-
I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we got to just, I
Right.
don't know what to do.
So we right now, if you guys go on to Fallen Hour Radio, that's at Fallen Hour on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, whatever you guys have on your phone, we're most likely on it. Search at Fallen Hour. You guys will be able to find Dogman and Papa Legba, an audio version. Dogman's not going to be a video version. There's no way to even make that happen.
Maybe
Yeah,
like little bits,
little
here and
snippets here and there, but you're not going to see
it's hilarious,
right.
but-
You're not going to see the whole entire episode. So search us and download those apps. Listen to us on the go, and you guys will be able to listen to Dogman, which is a freaking hilarious podcast. And we had Aaron Baker from After Horizons here.
Yeah, Wheezy.
And we have a new toy we're playing with, and it has one of these buttons.
God, I hate those buttons.
You hear that, and it's like, it's so much funner just to listen to that podcast, the
Yeah.
Dogman podcast, and you'll enjoy it. So, that being said, Markus is going to start editing the podcast from now on.
Yeah, the videos and the audios.
Right. So, I do social media marketing and have no time no more to edit podcasts, and Markus is taking that effort to edit the podcast, and let's see what he pulls out of it, how this podcast comes out.
I'm going to try to make it look pretty for all you.
So, is that it? Is that all you got?
Pretty much, I think so.
All right, so search us on the go. That is at Fallen Hour on YouTube and Facebook, facebook.com/Fallen Hour, at Fallen Hour on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Castbox. And just search us on Google. It will pop up somewhere.
So what do you want to do next?
Like
give them something to look forward to.
I just looked at Bigfoot over there on the...
Finally get to a Bigfoot podcast. Right. We've been asked about that for so long.
I think
when are you going to come out with a Bigfoot one?
I think our next two podcasts should be aliens, UFOs, and Bigfoot.
Yeah. Okay.
So whichever one falls first, you guys will just have to enjoy that one. Yeah. So what do you want to do next? What do you think? Bigfoot or UFOs?
Man, I could go either way.
Well, we still have that band that wants to come on and
Waco.
Right? Okay. So we'll figure it out. Let's toss a coin.
Okay.
So that being said, my name is Cdale Enick. This is Mananalu Water. That's Markus.
Jason Momoa. We're looking for sponsors.
It's freaking good.
It's amazing.
And there's only 9% of plastic that's ever recycled, which means that every piece of plastic you buy, it's not going to get recycled. They can't recycle it. Aluminum, on the other hand, recyclable. So stepping up and doing something right, at least. So that being said, my name is Cdale Enick. This is Markus, and you're listening to Fallen Hour Radio. Tripping over my words there.